China Business Network.
Okay, so Kim, so what does your business do?
Okay, well, GrokChina works with North American colleges and universities and helps them engage in China. And to kind of understand that, you need to understand what North American universities and colleges are actually doing in China. And a lot of people are kind of unaware of how active North American schools are in China. For example, well, all North American schools want to recruit the best possible students that they can get out of the China market. So they're engaged in things like working with agents, working with education fairs, but a lot of them are also doing strategic marketing programs and strategic marketing in the China market, and partnering with Chinese schools for the purposes of recruiting their students. Some schools will actually want to expand their footprint, and so they're actually looking to offer their programs in China, and to do that they have to work with a Chinese institution. Some North American schools are looking to earn revenues from things like teacher training programs, from things like licensing curriculum, running extracurricular programs, ASL programs. So there's a whole broad range of activities that North American institutions are engaged in or want to engage in the China market, and we help them do those things.
Great. So can you give us an idea of the size of that market?
Well, China as an education system is one of the largest in the world, and in terms of spending on education, it's also quite a substantial market. China has about 25 million students in the post-secondary sector, either at colleges or at universities, and that's almost the population of Canada. So they're very busy educating a lot of kids. In terms of students going abroad, it's about 200,000 every year go abroad to study either in the United States or Canada or Australia or the UK. And the spending per each child is really quite large. So for example, if we look at Canada as a good example, about 40,000 students go into Canada every year to study from China. And from the government of Canada's point of view, that represents not just revenue from tuition, but also sort of export value from the students' spend for living expenses, travel, that kind of thing. So from the point of view of Canada, just from China alone, they're looking at about 1.1 billion in export value. So even though we don't like to think of international education as a business, it is actually big business.
So can you tell us briefly about the demand your business serves?
At one level, we work with institutions and help them kind of bridge the gap between what they're able to do without a field office in China and what we're able to give them with our staff in Beijing. But at another level, what we're doing, and I think this is is even more interesting, we're helping facilitate Chinese students who want to study abroad sort of connect with North American institutions. And Chinese parents and Chinese students in studying abroad, they really are, their main motivation is to try and pick the strategy that's going to give them the best outcome after graduation, economically largely. They want to have really good jobs and a good future from an economic point of view, and the hope on the whole family's point of view is that they'll raise the sort of socioeconomic status of the entire family through the education of that one child. So that's what the kids are after. From my perspective, one of the things I think is most interesting is colleges and universities play a really important role in society in terms of acculturating youth. They're vehicles for communicating certain kinds of professional culture, certain kinds of class culture, and certain kinds of international culture. And, the hope is by Chinese students coming into the United States and Canada, which are two of the world's most international immigrant societies, that part of what will be communicated is the things that we've learned about how, we have so far to go still, but about getting along in sort of an international context and valuing diversity and multiculturalism. And so from my perspective, as China sort of emerges as this global superpower, I think that this new generation of Chinese citizens who have been exposed to a much more international environment, I think that that's a good thing.
So what aspects of the international educational landscape for North America and China do you see developing next?
Okay, well, international education in China has been changing a lot over the last decade or so. In recent years, one of the big changes is it's no longer the really wealthy kids who are studying abroad. We're seeing much more middle-class kids able to afford to study abroad, and that's partly driven by sort of China's developing economy, the increased valuation of the RMB isn't hurting. But it's also the culmination of that very controversial one-child policy. We have 2 generations now of resources from grandparents to parents all being focused down on that one child. And so it's enabling kids, even from middle-class backgrounds, there's enough resources available within that system for them to afford to study abroad. So that's one change that we're seeing, which is that it's no longer just the rich kids, it's middle-class kids too. Another one is, this is actually a reflection of a social and attitudinal change in China, but I think it's really important. China, not the West, is now viewed by many Chinese parents and many Chinese students as the land of opportunity. And so it used to be that it was the academic elites who would leave China to go and study abroad. But these days, you know, most kids in China, or a lot of kids in China, tend to dream about attending China's top-tier universities, Beijing University, Tsinghua University, Fudan. And it's the kids who don't gain access to those institutions who are more inclined to look at study abroad as their best second option in terms of, you know, their long-term strategy for financial success. So we're seeing now in the mix of students who are leaving China more of the 35th to 80th percentile academic performers, as opposed to, say, 10 or 15 years ago, where it was the kids who were in the top tier. So that's another change. Another important change is at the institutional level. For the last 10 or 15 years in China, the Ministry of Education, the government's been very focused, and probably rightly so, on developing their university sector and their research capabilities. Just in the last couple of years, there's been a switch in focus into the vocational college and 3-year college sector in China, and developing that, which is a good thing, because actually the vast majority of students in the post-secondary system in China fit into that tranche, about 21 out of the 25 million. So from the point of view of our customers, North American colleges and universities, there's a lot of opportunity there right now. And in fact, we are working with an increasing number of colleges and helping them access both the vocational and the 3-year college system within China. And they're able to do things like licensed curriculum and teacher training and, you know, those kinds of programs. And they're earning revenues from those kinds of activities. So that's the third thing. I would say another thing, and I don't know if you call this a trend, but something we're doing more of, is working with corporations and helping pair them with a North American institution, and then jointly offering some kind of program into the market. And the cool thing about that is everybody wins. Education in China is very honored and very revered, and actually it gets a lot of press. So we're able to get a lot of good PR for these corporations who participate in these programs. They get reputational benefit and a lot of goodwill. The education institution benefits because they share costs with the corporation, but also they reputationally benefit from association with industry in the eyes of students in China who are really focused on, you know, post-graduation employment, and then everybody shares costs. So that's something that we're doing that we think is pretty cool.